Hello, everyone. I'm Denton Davidson, Senior Editor for Gold Derby, and I'm excited to be hosting this making of panel discussion today for the limited series Gaslit on Starz. Joining me are creator and showrunner Robbie Pickering, writer Amelia Gray, actor Shea Whigham, who plays Gordon Liddy, cinematographer Larkin Seiple, and production designer Daniel Novotny. First of all, thank all of you for joining me today. It's such a great series. Robbie, let's just start off with you. Talk about how this series came to be, the podcast that inspired it, and what really led to this showing up on Starz.
Well, I've always been like a huge Nixon geek since I was very young, since I was probably 11 or 12, and I've always kind of looked at it as the culture around Nixon as the kind of locus point for current, not only malfeasance in politics, but kind of culture war stuff. And I grew up in a very evangelical Christian conservative home, so that's probably has something to do a little bit with it. But and simultaneously, I've always been fascinated with Southern conservative women. And when I first came to LA, there was this book out called Nixon Land that I really wanted to adapt into a different kind of story about this period, and kind of a story about Nixon, but in the sense that it's a story of people around Nixon, and that wasn't attractive to anybody as a series. And then about 10 years later, the Slow Burn podcast came along, and it did a similar thing to what I wanted to do, but it really centered Martha Mitchell's story in the first episode. And that became my way in to kind of conning people into doing a show about Nixon, which I'd always wanted to do. And at the same time, it kind of combined my love of writing Southern conservative women. And we sold it, and we just it was hard to get people to reframe, harder than you'd think, to get people to reframe their thinking about this period and about the people involved in the scandal, to kind of center this woman. You wouldn't think that to be the case, but people were really having trouble wrapping their minds around it. But Starz really embraced it, and I wrote the pilot, and Julia read it and wanted to do it, which helped us sell it to Starz, and she wanted Sean Penn to be in it with her, and from there it just kind of came together. And by that time I was working with Amelia. I had been working with her for a while, and we just started rolling on it and putting it together.
And Amelia, you worked with Robbie and Mr. Robot. So what was it like for you to come on to this project? And what about these characters, made them so intriguing for you to write this script?
Yes. Robbie and I were working on Mr. Robot. We were in New York at the time because they were in pre-production on the last
We were in
season.
prison. We were in an icy prison.
We were in jail in New York City, and a literal Arctic hellhole jail. It was great. And so we would take these long frozen walks, and he would tell me about Watergate. And I was, first of all, like, I do not care. Why is this man talking to me, my coworker? I don't like him. But as I started listening more, it was it's a fascinating story. It's funny. I'm not a politics geek. I'm kind of the opposite of Robbie in that way. I'm not a true story kind of politics junkie at all, and didn't know much about Watergate. My history professor, all of them would be horrified to know that I was in charge of anything related to politics, but even tangentially. But it was the Martha Mitchell angle of it that was what was so appealing. Robbie, I think, like, really honed in on the side of history that people really don't know, and the strange sort of fascistic side, and the really fascinating characters in that, including G. Gordon Liddy, who was kind of, when I learned about Liddy as a character, it was like, oh, this would be a really fun character to write.
Yeah, Amelia is the best writer G. Gordon Liddy dialogue that has ever lived. Amelia could sit down and right now and write a monologue for G. Gordon Liddy that blow everybody away with its weirdness.
Well, and the key with Liddy, you'll see if you watch the show, he's you know, I think Shea plays him so intelligently because you could just go all out with Liddy, same as in the writing of Liddy, and just go nuts and just have so much fun, but it would be so over the top and flat. But what we tried to do with the writing is kind of peel it back to find the real character, and then Shea took it and went the rest of the way to find a real character who is interesting and scary and, you know, not just you know, fun to write, just like a real person in that time, which I think was cool.
And I can't stress enough that Amelia she's not a fan of politics, but we're both fans of like really relatably dumb people. And
Yes.
there's so much relatable dumbness at the center of this Watergate. We could see, I think from the beginning, me and Amelia could see aspects of ourselves in all of these characters in their kind of like mundane stupidity,
Right.
which was really, I think that's what hooked her.
I mean, I went to Arizona State, which and I didn't really do well there, you know, academically. So.
And there's so many parallels to what is happening now. I mean, I think it says something about people that are running the country behind the scenes, behind the president, and that are attached. That, you know, is that something that happened naturally, or were you trying to, you know, draw light to that comparison?
You know, I think people say like there's this saying, you know, about history repeating it doesn't repeat itself or it rhymes or something, and it kind of takes the onus off people, you know, and it's just history that repeats itself. But really, people are all pretty prone to complicity in the same ways throughout history. I mean, and throughout the world, not just in politics. You know, when I remember, you know, we're writing John Dean and maybe the second or third episode with Amelia, and me and Amelia are writing him, and we're not getting his voice. We have all these examples of these people from our lives who we're kind of writing, but at a certain point, we're not getting John Dean's voice exactly. And he's this ambitious guy, kind of, you know, would do anything to rise up and speak to the powerful people. And at some point, and he's commitment phobic with women. And at some point, I called up Amelia, and I said, let's just write me. Let's just write the dumbest version of me, you know, 5-10 years ago before I was married, just a Hollywood dummy, you know, trying to.
I got you.
Yeah. And we got it. And we took that approach with each character. And I think that says something. Like, I look at people in the Trump administration. I mean, we've looked a lot at people at the Trump administration or the Clinton administration or Reagan administration with Iran-Contra. And these kind of pitfalls, these kind of weaknesses in people who they're willing to subsume who they are, who they think they are for out of ambition or to be close to somebody in power because they feel valued by somebody in power, or because of zealotry in the case of Liddy. That's what repeats itself, you know, and that's why these scandals and things like that keep happening. So the parallels today weren't conscious for us. We just thought they were implicit, you know, in the material, because it's not that different. You know, John Oliver used to call Trump-Russia scandal stupid Watergate. Well, Watergate was stupid Watergate, and Iran-Contra was stupid Watergate, and the Clinton scandal was stupid. All of them are stupid.
Really well put. Shea, I'm gonna sneak over to you because you're the representative actor on the panel. And as we've said, you play Gordon Liddy, a real man, an odd man, a really unbelievable life. He just died just over a year ago. When you saw this script, you know, what excited you about the role? And then, you know, how did you really dig into this person and become him, other than his mustache?
Well, and Matt Ross, our director, who deserves a lot of credit as well. He called me up. I'd worked with Sam on Homecoming, and I don't know if it was excitement. It was more fear, to be honest with you, when I first when I first read it, because to take on someone as infamous and iconic as Liddy, I knew it was going to be a difficult task. And so, I remember talking with Matt early on. I said, I'm not interested in doing all the President's Men again. That's been done. It's incredible. I don't want to do that. And so I read all the scripts and I said, this is really interesting, because for me, I'm always looking for character and story, and it's gotta be, you know, I have to care about them, and I did with Liddy. And so we started there, and I started with, you know, you're always looking to find the truth and what can I hang my hat on with him. You know what I mean? All the, like Amelia said, all the wildness, that'll take care of itself. I wanted to demystify, you know, forget the myth and find the man in there. And so we started there. I started really humbly, really as if I knew nothing. You know what I mean? And then built very broadly until we begun, you know. And it was really fear, but you know, fear was a big motive. Like, can I get him? Can I find him? You know? And you know, so that was what really got me. And then you find little clues along the way, or I remember walking in to seeing Martha in Georgia, Martha's apartment, and what Daniel had done with that. And that was just a photo shoot. You remember that, guys? We did that photo shoot, and I went, this is something very, I picked up on that. And then when we very early got in there with Larkin, and I said to Matt, this guy's, he's special. And I feel, you know, so all these things started to happen, and you know, I think we put together something really special.
And what's it like, you know, preparing for that? I mean, because he became an actor after all this happened, like some sort of game shows. I mean, were you looking at footage of him, and like, what was it like to really try to be a living person?
I remember when I first started, like, you're looking for any clue you can. I'm looking for, you know, whenever I take on like this, or Eli and Boardwalk, or these characters, so I started, you know, wait, ask me that question. Sorry, what was the question? Sorry.
I'm just curious about, you know, the research that you did on him, and if you saw all that footage, because he did become an actor in a talk shows and all these crazy things you would not expect. Well,
I started looking at some of the footage later, but it didn't really help me, because I was concerned with 71, 72, you know, 73. So I looked at a little bit of that stuff when he was on, you know, Letterman and Conan.
Like that. Once he's on Miami Vice, it's all over.
Yeah. And so, but we just looked at just, you know, a large amount of research, but the thing that really helped me out was Will, his autobiography. That provided a lot for me. And then oddly, you know, you find the showman later on in him. He really wanted to be an actor. He really just wanted to be seen. And then you go back and you look at some of the documentaries of him out here in Hollywood with Schwarzenegger, and you know, he just had this larger than life personality. But the thing that I really honed in on was that he didn't name names, and I can really get down with that guy. I can really try to understand that guy and how much he loved his family. And, you know, his 5 kids and Francis. And I remember when I got to the scene in the first episode with my child, after I've been laughed out of the room after Gemstones. And then we see this tantrum, this child and him with Dean. They just don't understand my genius. And my son provides this sage, soothsaying advice from my basement. You know, that's the kind of stuff that I really hung my hat on, Liddy.
Yeah, Shea loved that scene. When we first wrote it, she was like, that scene is amazing. Yeah.
I think it turned out one of my favorites. I mean,
I was gonna ask about that scene, because I think it encompasses a piece of all of you that are here. You know, that room in the basement, and the weird dialogue where he's like, he says something about it to his son about, doing a whoopsie. I mean, I thought it was hilarious. It's kind of twisted. I think there's a picture of Hitler in the background. So, in Larkin, when you came on board, what did you want to talk to Matt, the director, about in terms of, what was that vision like? What sort of tone did you want to set for this series and to bring us back 50 years?
Well, Matt, the first thing Matt asked for is he wanted it to look bold, but he also said if I wanted it to look like the 1970s, we'd be shooting on 16. So it was a bit of an homage, but also like a bit of modern filmmaking. The big thing that we were trying to do, besides using older lenses and older lighting techniques, is personalize the narrative visually for all the characters. So Shea's character had his own lens on the show, which was a 27 mil called the Liddy. So whenever Shea had a scene, that lens would appear. And that's why all of his close-ups feel a little different than the other actors. And John Mitchell's character, we use longer lenses throughout the show.
I demand that too every time I work.
It's
Your own
part of his deal. It's a very dirty lens by now. But yeah, we kind of just started building the visual structure around the personal life of all the characters. So Martha is constantly seen through reflections and mirrors throughout the show, and that was an idea that we talked about our very first meeting with Matt Ross. And you see it evolve throughout the show. There's actually a journey of her reflected, kind of playing with like the duality of like the public life and the personal life, and her constantly trying to figure out which one matters more. And same thing with Dean. Dean, we ended up, because he's, as Robbie said it, he's like a young dumb Hollywood idiot. We kind of made lenses wider and closer to him to kind of create a bit more of a tension or pressure to kind of feel like, what dumb choice is he going to make next? We wanted to I kind of basically add some humor to his stuff for his character. And then we kind of then played different visual techniques throughout the episodes. The reflection argument in episode 1 was actually a reaction to it was decided it was also a reaction to the cast not wanting to go really big with the fighting. They wanted to make it more elegant, and we had kind of blocked everything for a big fight. And when they were like, no, we're not gonna have this physical fight, we want it to be a fight just through kind of yelling across the room at each other, we switched, and the whole thing was done through reflections. We also used like 6 different sets of lenses, and different characters had different lenses. The villains had sharper glass that was more contrasty, like Zeiss Super Speeds. Martha, we used lenses called Canon K35s and old zooms. And we also just kind of played around with the different episodes. Like there's a scene of Liddy meeting under a bridge that's all silhouette. That's more of a nod to like, 7 Days of the Condor. 7 Days of the Condor. I'm butchering
3 days.
3 days. 3 days.
There's an extra long time with the
a couple different beats. And the main thing we pulled from the 70s was the fact that the film stocks back then were really slow, which meant that you couldn't really, it was really hard to light things. So if you look at all the night scenes, it's basically like pitch blackness and then the actor lit in the foreground. And we kind of kept that theme throughout the show, especially like the Watergate break-in and all the different scenes. A lot of them are generally Shea at night with his cohorts. They're all silhouetted, or you just see their faces, and we're kind of letting the streets go dark, which helped because the whole show is shot in Los Angeles, and it's definitely supposed to be set in DC.
Yeah, it also helps that helped in post with the VFX too, like the kind of darkness and reality. And like we shot the Watergate and the Howard Johnson's at the LA Center Studios, and I think that the way you guys shot it really lent itself to us building kind of the hojos there, and letting your imagination take over in some of the shadows and things. It actually, I find one thing that I think when people watch the show they won't realize is the extent of the VFX in it. And I think all that, you guys did such an elegant job planning that, and I watch the show now and I'm just kind of amazed at all the VFX we laid in. I was really concerned about shooting in LA for DC, but I think it's pretty seamless And that's due a lot to Larkin and Matt and how they kind of plan that out.
What are some of those VFX that, I mean, let's highlight a couple. What would people be surprised about?
The opening scene, or not the opening scene, the end of episode 1, Liddy and the crew are in the back of a Jeep, and they happen to just stop on a bridge, and the camera booms up to see Watergate. And that was shot in San Pedro. Right now, we just boomed up and saw palm trees. That's a good example of it. My favorite visual effect is really simple. All the sets we shot, there's no green screen at all. They're all fake backdrops. So like when she's in Malibu at the hotel, or when she's at her apartment, Chad put birds flying in the background of all the shots.
Larkin, I was the bird guy. I was like, Chad, we got to put birds here. Me and Amelia were constantly like, birds, birds.
Yeah, the birds. There's a lot of birds. Now I look, there's actually birds in every single.
Yes.
There's so many birds.
There's birds
Some might say there's too many birds. You be the judge.
Yeah. Or like the Hojos that's across from Watergate there was really nothing there. Like when we shot it, we literally just had like fluorescent tubes outside of the building, and Chad, our VFX supervisor, completely changed it and made it a hotel. Or the shot of Liddy running across the street and tilting up, that's all visual effects. And even the establishing shots that you see throughout the story of Washington, D.C., we shot a bunch of people in costume on green screen. And then our second unit actually went to D.C. and shot plates, and we just matched them in L.A. So anytime you see a police officer or someone smoking a cigarette, they're in L.A. and the background is actually in D.C. That was, we really didn't want to go to D.C. We did everything we could not to there.
Dan, going to you last, but certainly not least, the production design is really incredible. I'm going to start with the homes, the hotels. We're talking Southern Arkansas, socialite, luxury vibes of the late 60s, early 70s. So, what was it like to pull those spaces together? What sort of research went into getting their home, first of all, the way you wanted it?
The Watergate, I mean, it was a lot of research on finding out what was authentic, and Matt and Robbie both wanted this to feel authentic. It wasn't to be the real deal. And so a lot of that is a world of conservative Republicans in DC in the early 70s. So it's more like their style is from the 60s and 50s, right? They're not top of the line. They're not cutting edge in their design. So it's a lot of the choices were like trying to step back, take it back a bit, and just grounded, try to keep it as grounded as possible. So the apartment was a little bit of a hurdle because what's authentic and real just is so boring and drab, and nobody wanted to shoot in it. It's just boring. So that was a place where we took some creative license to make it feel a little more cinematic, make her apartment feel more cinematic. And a lot of it has to do with putting Julia Roberts in her home for a long time, right? It's got to look good, right? I think we've all seen the research, or I know the production people, we've seen what her real apartment was, and it was just terrible. So that apartment was highlighted and tweaked, but also part of the challenge was making that environment particularly feel not like a thrift store, right? Because in a lot of those homes, often they're just terrible. You walk in them and they're just tan and brown and yellow and mustard, and it would feel like a thrift shop if you looked at it. And this happens on shows sometimes where people want an early 70s set and they show up and like, this looks terrible. So we wanted that to keep that elegance in her apartment. The rest of the environments were we tried to match what really was, what it really would be. So sometimes they're just simple. I mean, the high-end kitchens in those days were Formica, yellow Formica, mustard colored Formica. That was the thing. It was the age of plastics and all that new technology, and a little bit of some gimmicks, some little weird gadgets that came out in the late 60s and people thought it was hot, like the trouser ironing thing that that Dean had, or he had a lot of those gimmicky little weird things. We had a full-time researcher finding all of these items and really honing on what these places would be. So
I like the sunken living room too, and when all the guys were meeting together. What sort of team does it take to pull all of those spaces together? I mean, how many people are working on your set decorating team to get so? I mean, it's just so much stuff. When I think about that production design, that's what I think about is every corner of every room, there's something there.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were about 50 people in the construction department, construction and paint, 50, 60 people.
Wow.
In the decorating department, it must have been about 25, 30 people. Could have my numbers off there, but we had and in my office, just in the art department, we probably had about 10 or 15 people. It's a lot of people. It's a lot of people to pull that together. And when I come on board a show, there's always there's the immediate urgent, there's the short-sighted panic. There's the urgent, like short-term panic after one short-term panic after one short-term panic. So I have to try to step back and focus on what's important for the whole project, and try to give everybody what they need, give the people what they need to keep their job going, which is the construction department and this decoration department and props. Props were fantastic, great department there, but also focus on the bigger picture, right? The longer what Matt and Larkin would see, what they would actually see on camera, and how to tell the story at the same time. So there was a lot of people involved for sure, and it was a great team. It was a big show. I mean, we had 8 episodes, 8 hours of television. It's a lot of that's a lot of scripted content to review and try to push out. It's an 8-hour movie, with a lot of different environments. So had its early challenges, but once we got it in the one liner we scheduled, we were able to focus on I guess one bite at a time. Fair way to say it.
If you had to pick one thing, like bigger, whether it's like a couch or just like a picture on the wall, one thing on that set that made you smile, that made you happy that it made the cut, what would it be?
And in the Mitchell penthouse?
In any scene, anything at all.
I often like the flowers. They were so bad. They were just, because if somebody says, okay, give me a flower arrangement, right? Sometimes you'll say, well, give me any flowers, it'll look fine, right? So, okay, then the flowers show up and that's not what I want, right? So these flowers were just, I don't know if you guys agree, but they were so bad. So they were just like hospital flowers, from the 70s. And
oh yeah.
I
remember the ones in the Mitchell apartment were so beautiful though. I would go just look at them.
They were beautiful.
Beautiful.
They were elegant for hospital flowers, for sure.
Yeah. Dan has better taste than I do, once again.
Amelia's only ever seen hospital flowers, to be clear.
It's where I go.
I also think, Dan, the paintings, like the Mitchell's paintings in their house, most people wouldn't believe. Most people would think that's something we made up, but that was real. They had these really gaudy paintings of each of them. Yeah,
that was. I had to see the research photos to believe it, and they do exist. That picture of John Mitchell, that's a pretty good match to what it really was. No, the paintings and the art were fantastic. I like the sunken living room. That was awesome. I mean, who doesn't like a good sunken living room? I mean, everybody. Yeah.
Shea, what's it like as an actor to get a set like that? I mean, does that help pull everything together for you, to sort of make everything feel a little more real?
Yeah. You're looking. I mean, for every department, obviously hair and makeup and set. The Howard Johnson set. I mean, I coming back to the opening scene, the boldness to open that from Larkin and Matt. I think Larkin, correct me if I'm wrong. We were going to do it. Am I talking to the 5 freedom fighters, the 5 Cubans? And then we said no. We wanted it just to be. We didn't want to know time and space, and so. That was the basement set, which also was the set that my son and I mean, yeah, it was everything, Dan. We had the reenactment battle that Liddy would, I would be paint. There was a scene where I was painting. Um, what war was it?
The little figurines.
Revolutionary. It was all of that. The specificity is what you're looking for. Denton, you're always looking. For me, is specificity that helps you unlock. Because Liddy very easily could go into caricature. Very easy become a cartoon character, which at times he was in his life. So all of that matters. All of that helps me.
And the writing, when you guys look at this entire group come together, Amelia and Robbie, you see it all come to fruition. What does that feel like as writers? So, to see everyone speak your words and the set looks just maybe like you imagined it or even better. What does that feel like for you both?
Well, we can talk about that beginning scene. That's the first scene I came up with in the show, and it's the first scene I described to the producers is Liddy. He's kind of in this black, you don't know where he is in the world, and it was designed to kind of be this kind of chorus before the show, and they always say a kind of rule of thumb in writing is TV writing is you want to do your teaser that kind of states the thesis of the show, and the classic one is in The Wire. The kind of this is the opening of The Wire really states what the whole show is going to be about, and the Liddy thing is just something I came up with as a way to state the antithesis of the show. To say it's this pompous kind of weird guy in front of a candle flame in a black void telling you that history is written by the winners, not the losers. And you're about to see a show about history from the loser's point of view. And I can say for both of us, for both me and Amelia, I remember very specifically, do you remember watching that, Amelia, and just being like, there were so many things on the show that included that I was amazed that it worked. I mean, there's just like so many swings in the show tonally that we did in the script that it's like, there were so many things we wrote that I didn't necessarily think might not work, I mean, what did you feel when you saw that, Amelia?
Well, I mean, Shea was doing the whole monologue again and again and again and again and again. And it was just like, it was so intense and cool to watch. And it was like one of those breathless moments of like, wow, this thing that only existed in our heads is now being made real,
And for Robbie and Amelia, just from an actor's point of view, perspective, there are times when I find I needed more. I knew how intense we started this, so I was looking for levity anywhere I could find it in him. And so I remember, and tell me if I remember when I'm talking to my son, it was written, it was beautifully written, but I said at one point, like, I need something a little more. And I think it was Amelia, who went back and wrote the part about friendship. Was that right? I was just saying, I need something here to Matt. I'm not, and it needs to be simple. And Amelia went back and in a night wrote that. What was it?
Well, part of the friendship bit is actually just an Irish proverb or something. Is that there are good ships and wood ships and ships that sail the sea, but the best ships are friendships. Which is true.
I read that and I just immediately, I mean, it was one of those magical things that happened, where it's not forced. And the kid, and we found it, and we were working hard with the kid, was great. My son was great. And I just kept saying, and that was one of those magical moments for me.
That scene is an example of something that happens when, and Larkin was talking about something like this earlier, when you hit these kind of things where you have to simplify, or think of things in a different way, because you don't have I mean, the original version of that scene, if you guys remember, was there was a huge scene of Liddy having dinner at Howard Hunt's house, and we had to cut it out because of locations and because it was just going to take us too long to shoot and all that, and we were having to look for places to pare down locations. And you know, I felt like there was a void there, like Liddy needed some shift in his emotional valence, that he then figures out how to go into John Mitchell and really charm him. And that just came out of thinking, well, what do we have? What sets do we have? We have the basement. And who could Liddy be talking to? Well, you know that Liddy has this strong relationship with his family. And so I thought his son. And you write that scene, and then a thing happens where it's like, it needs one little thing. And Amelia comes in and puts that little thing in there. That really comes out of necessity, of like these things that you could react to not getting to do a big Liddy dinner at the Hunt house with all these other characters in it by fighting it and being like, oh my God, we need that scene. Let's do it in a different way. Or you could pivot and really find something more intimate and better. And I'm really proud of that scene, because we were able to really, I think, do a scene. I mean, the scene at Liddy and at Hunt's house is really funny, but we were able to find something more and deeper. And it was a real, that was a real coming together of everybody pitching in. And I mean, by the way, the boy who plays Shea's son, who plays Liddy's son, is just so great in that scene. And we were just able to find something more meaningful.
It also is a great example of how you can hate Liddy, but be so excited every time he's on the screen at the same time in this series. Well, congratulations to all of you on this limited series. It was such a great effort of teamwork. Gaslit is on Starz. Best of luck at this year's Emmy Awards, and thanks so much for all of you coming together and chatting with Gold Derby today about your work. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
Thanks.